So I'm going to give you a little intro here before I bring you on, just in case
Yeah.
people don't know who you are. So
It's highly likely.
Hey everybody, this is Cameron, and today I have a guest that I have been wanting on this show for years. He was a writer and performer on The Ben Stiller Show. He wrote and executive produced The Simpsons for nearly a decade. You've seen him on Roseanne, Ellen, Seinfeld. He was in The Love Bug with Bruce Campbell. You can see him now on YouTube on his Hangin' with Dr. Z show, where he dresses up as a character from Planet of the Apes and does a Tonight Show, Johnny Carson, Larry Sanders type of show. It's fantastic. Check it out. Also, he is the host of the Dana Gould Hour, which you can find on his website. He is dropping today a David Lynch episode, which he took 3 different podcasts that he did and combined them into one gigantic episode. So, Dana, it is a pleasure to have you here, and please welcome everybody, Mr. Dana Gould.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. I'm a big fan. I was really delighted to when you DM'd me. I was like, oh God, that guy knows who I am. This is crazy.
Well, that's funny because that's exactly how I felt when you responded back. Because I have been following you since the early '90s, so it's extraordinary to have you on here. Thank you again.
No, it's my pleasure. It's so funny because I listen to you when I'm in the car, and so you kind of feel like you know the person, because it's just you and me in the car all day.
I once drove around listening to the audiobook of The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, and having Cheryl Lee's voice echoing through your car for 8 straight hours is something else. First thing I wanted to touch base on is you share with me a picture that you took at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery when they showed Blue Velvet there, and I posted it on social media, giving you full credit, of course, and it went viral.
Yes, I did not take that photo.
Oops.
That's okay. I'm glad I could clarify this. That was posted on Instagram, and then my friend, who's a big Twin Peaks fan, my friend Mark Pitta, put it through a filter and came up with that. So whoever took that photo, you should sue me. But it's a beautiful photo. I actually printed it up. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's an incredible photo. It took my breath away with the sky, with the trees, and just the amount of people there.
It's everything. I mean, there's a reason. One of the things that I talk about, and when David passed in January, I was getting ready to do the next episode of my podcast, and I thought, well, I'm gonna talk about him because, like a lot of you, like he meant a lot to me, and going back to the '80s when I was living in Boston, where I'm from, and was just starting out in my career, but like going to see Eraserhead at midnight at Harvard Square Cinema was like an identifier. It's like, yeah, I'm weird, and proudly so, and these are my people, and this is what I do. I mean, it meant a lot, and I was a ginormous Twin Peaks fan. We'll get into that, and I think that it was the timing of when he died, and he was so much a part of Los Angeles culture. The weather reports and the fact that he passed away as the city was literally burning down around him, and it had just happened after a political event that seemed to celebrate everything he is opposed to. It just felt like, it was like on January 15th, we were all thinking, God, things could not get worse. And reality went, hold my beer. That I was just really wanted to talk about it. And I didn't realize I got to the end of the segment and I just barely scratched the surface. So I thought, well, I'm just going to keep going until I run out. And so it took three, in my podcast, what I do is I worked really hard to find the most labor intensive and least financially rewarding version of a podcast that one could do. It took a lot of research. But what I do is I have 2 interviews that are each an hour long. And then I have a middle segment that's usually about a half hour in length that I call True Tales from Weirdsville, that will touch on a subject that we discussed and just take a deep dive into it. And there's audio drops and sound things. It's really its own little mini podcast in it. And, it could be, I do a story about David Lynch. I do a story about the Orson Welles War of the Worlds podcast. I do a story about the Roswell crash. I do a story about, Murray Wilson, whatever interests me at the time. And the one with David ended up, we just dropped it today. If you go to the Dana Gould Hour in whatever podcast app you have, the episode is called True Tales from Lynchville, because the segment on my podcast is called True Tales from Weirdsville. And it's about 2 hours long, but it takes him from Missoula to up to now. And it's just it's sort of an entertaining, somewhat comedic recounting of his career and thus and such. And we share a TM instructor, and I made part of the foundation and stuff like that.
Well, I didn't even know you were a fan of Twin Peaks and David Lynch until I picked up this Blu-ray of Carnival of Souls, and there you are in the special features, not only talking about this film, but David Lynch and Twin Peaks. And
oh yeah, that is in that.
I was going to say, by the way, there is going to be a Barnes & Noble Criterion sale that launches this Friday, so be sure to I'm always having to save up for those big sales.
I understand. Yeah, Dr. Z just went to the Criterion closet. That will be showing soon, and this was one of his jokes. I can do it right here because I have it handy. Dr. Z went, "Who doesn't love kid and play?"
So I'm watching your special feature on Carnival of Souls, and all of a sudden you start talking about how the re-release for this film came out around the same time as Twin Peaks, and that David Lynch cited it as an inspiration, and so you sought it out. And I have to say, if you are a David Lynch fan and you've not seen Carnival of Souls, this is a great film to watch, because it definitely goes into the dreamlike atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, I describe it in shorthand as like it's a David Lynch movie before David Lynch made movies. And it was at the height of that time, early 90s, when Twin Peaks came out, that he cited Carnival of Souls, and they got a big re-release, and it became available to everybody. I was on the Late Show with David Letterman doing stand-up, and the other guests were Siskel and Ebert, and they had talked about Carnival of Souls on an episode, and I was in the makeup room with Gene Siskel, and I said, "You turned me on to one of my favorite movies, Carnival of Souls." And he was, and we talked about it. "Oh, that's a great movie, blah blah blah." So then we go down to the green room, and Roger Ebert's in the green room, and Gene says, and this is a great snapshot of their relationship. Gene says, "Roger, this is Dana. He's doing stand-up on the show. He was just telling me that he discovered Carnival of Souls through our show." And Roger went, "Why is it so cold in here?" Okay, nice to see you.
Roger Ebert, notoriously not a fan of David Lynch until The Straight Story came out. A lot of people make jokes about how it was the lesbian part of Mulholland Drive that made him a fan, but actually it was The Straight Story that turned him around first.
Yeah, I think Roger Ebert liked Eraserhead, and then went out of his way to loathe everything after that until The Straight Story.
He even disliked The Elephant Man. So.
Oh, he did. I didn't. Yeah. How do you not? What did he not like about The Elephant Man?
He didn't like the opening, and he didn't like the ending. So therefore, it became a 2-star movie.
Yeah.
and his critique of Blue Velvet was interesting because he was advocating on behalf of Isabella Rossellini, who seemed to have been, and Gene Siskel even says in the interview, she has free will. She knew what she was doing. He didn't force her to do that. You know, they dated. I don't think she had a problem with it. And you wrote, you know, there's some things in the movie you wrote, Roger, that you could say were putting women in a dicey position.
I mean, Roger Ebert also famously booed when Wild at Heart won the Cannes Film Festival. So.
Yeah, I actually mentioned that in the piece that I do on the podcast. I excerpt his reviews. I excerpt his review of Blue Velvet, and I excerpt him commenting about Wild at Heart on the show, where he actually goes, Wild at Heart, which just won the Palme d'Or at France, that I was really opposed to.
As a fan of seeing David Lynch's films in the theater, Wild at Heart is the one I think that everybody needs to see in a theater because it's so cinematic and so loud.
Yeah, and I remember seeing it when it came out, you know, and thinking like, I said like, well, Blue Velvet is his blue movie, and this is his red movie. You know, this starts off in your face, and it was, you know, you look at the reviews of Dr. Strangelove. If there's any director that I compare David with, it's Stanley Kubrick.
Mm-hmm.
In the way that their movies, you need to see them more than once. They're too dense. They grow on you. And he's not going to you. You have to go to him. Mm-hmm. You know, he's not giving the audience what it wants. And that's, you know, my theory of the, you know, the public, the audience comes last. That's always my theory.
I like to joke about that. Eyes Wide Shut feels like a movie Lynch would have made between Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive.
Yes. Someone said, and I kind of agree, that Eyes Wide Shut should have been a comedy like Dr. Strangelove.
Well, you know, apparently Kubrick wanted to go that direction because he sought out Steve Martin and Woody Allen to star in it at one point.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that, but there you go. There you go. But you know, Wild at Heart is one of those movies that you have to, you know, you have to see. You know, it really does. You have to see it more than once, and you really, and it is it's a satire of America. You know, whatever he says about people finding love in hell, it's also, you know, there's a reason that it's loved in France, because that's how people in Europe view our country.
I also love the structure of Wild at Heart, how the first hour is so fast, and then when they get to Big Tuna and they have no money, the movie slows down. And that's just, you know, very few movies actually change their pacing by what location they're at. So.
Yeah, it's an Elvis movie. You know, it's just like it's like the rated R movie that Elvis never made.
Well, it also was the precursor to True Romance, Natural Born Killers, California.
All of those movies, it came first. And then that became like a subgenre. There's a really, I'm sure you've seen it, there's a really funny clip of Ebert seeing David Lynch at Cannes for Mulholland Drive. Mm-hmm. And he's literally saying like, I liked it. I really liked it. And David's just like, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you, Robin. Nice to see you. And it's just like, I didn't care when you didn't like it. I don't care when you do like it.
So I have to ask you, since today is the 8-year anniversary of part 8 of season 3 coming out today, the episode that made everybody's mind go. So, as a longtime Lynch Twin Peaks fan, what did you think when you sat down in 2017 and part 8 came onto your television?
It's really funny. Season 3, I was in Georgia. I was in Atlanta. I had a series on IFC called Stand Against Evil, which was a comedy horror show. And we were in production when season 3 came out. And I remember that was sort of like my little reward at the end of the week after shooting. Was I had I had, my kids were little, and I was, so I was alone, and they weren't with me on set. I mean, they visited once or twice, but they live in LA and I was in Atlanta. But I knew at the end of the week, after working all week, I could lay on the couch and watch 1 hour of Twin Peaks, and that was my reward. And I remember, like a lot of people with episode 8, I kept waiting for the show to start. It's like, okay, when are they going to get, like, it seemed like a cold open.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's this weird cold open, and then they're going to catch up to the show. And then at about 15 minutes, I went, no, this is the show. This is the show. And yeah, it just, you had to just, and my first thought was, this is the horror movie David Lynch would have made in the 50s. This is one of the best monster movies that came out this year. If George Romero was making films in the late 50s, this is what it would have been.
Sure.
And then after I, plugged it into the Twin Peaks lore, and it took and I didn't have I couldn't rewatch it. I just I didn't have a DVR, so I had to wait until I could see it again and then understand the Twin Peaks lore. I didn't realize that was Laura's mother. I didn't there's a lot of things I had to go back in and pick it up later, but I loved it. I mean, the scene in the radio station was just, it was everything I love. And one of my favorite movies is It Came from Outer Space. And there's something about the desert in that time period. Black and white. It's just such a ripe, beautiful place to set a movie. I mean, the government's doing a lot of shady stuff. We're mucking around with nature. There's an alien beauty to the desert to begin with, and it's just one of my favorite places to set a story like that. And it was just, it was gorgeous. It was gorgeous, and it also was funny because there were some effect, and again, like, by the way, Stand Against Evil, if anybody saw it, we were egregious in what we stole from David Lynch on that show. It was really obscene. But what was interesting is there are some effects that he does that he doesn't really, like the scenes of like Laura taking her face off. It's a little cheesy. But he's just like, this doesn't need to be that good, and you could see where they put the money.
The atom bomb detonation is probably the best in cinematic history.
Yeah. Did you see that? I'm sure you looked at the photo that was behind Gordon Cole's desk at the auction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't even compete with any of those prices.
I ended up, I could have gotten what I wanted to get, which was just a chair, but not his chair. It was just like it was like an Eames mid-century chair that looked really great. But I was not. I was salmon fishing in Alaska, which is a whole other horror story.
Is that for the new season of Fishing with John?
Yeah, it would have been great. No, it's my oldest daughter just graduated college, and she's a paleontologist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she was in Alaska on a research, on a dig, and said, and then my wife and I went up to hang out with her for a week after, just to be in Alaska and hang out. And she wanted to go salmon fishing. I was like, okay, what 22-year-old heterosexual woman wants to go salmon fishing? My daughter. So while on vacation, I got up at 4:30, drove 2 hours and 20 minutes, then stood at the side of a river doing this for 6 hours, and then drove 2.5 hours home. She caught 3, I caught none. I didn't want to catch one. I don't like the idea of it. But that was the day of the auction. So, but I would have got that atom bomb. That was some sweet stuff. Stuff went for so much more money than I thought it would have gone for.
Yeah, there were some things that didn't go for as much as I thought they would, and other things that were like 20,000 more than I thought that they would have. But one of the things they had there was a complete David Lynch annotated screenplay of Fire Walk with Me with shot lists that he never used.
Yeah, I want to get the script before Chet Desmond enters the picture. I want to get the Coop script, but I do love that character. I know you made a film with Andy Blackburn, and if I were to make a film, I am very interested in the continuing stories of Chet Desmond or what happens to Chet Desmond. I love that character, and I don't think I could play him. I'm not that good looking. I could maybe pull off Sam Stanley, but I love those two characters. That first segment of Bizarro Twin Peaks, where everything is like I could be in that role for 4 hours. I love that character. I love those two guys together. I loved it. I want more. I think it's great. I was sorry that he wasn't in The Return. I think it was just because he was unwell.
Yes, that's what he told me. I met he came here to Monterey for a concert, and there was a meet and greet before. So I got to talk with him for a few minutes, and that's what he told me. He said they reached out. He didn't have any idea what the role was going to be, but at that time he couldn't say yes because he wasn't feeling well.
Yeah. He's a handsome devil.
That he is. And when I told him I was making a film about Annie, he said, "Can I be in it? Can I say, watch out for the blue rose?" And I was like, "Yeah, that'd be great." And of course, his handler is just like, "This way, Mr. Isaac."
and he's in Silence of the Lambs. He's in the SWAT team.
Since we're talking about Chris Isaac, what an extraordinary life this guy. He's worked with Lynch, Demi, Bertolucci, Kubrick. Right? It's like,
what did he do with Kubrick?
He did Eyes Wide Shut. The Baby Did a Bad Thing.
Yeah, okay, of course.
Yeah, and I'm just like this. I mean, then he had the starring role in a Bertolucci film, Little Buddha.
Right. Yep.
And of course, he had the Showtime show, the Chris Isaac show. He was in. He worked with John Waters in A Dirty Shame.
And he's really funny. He's really funny. I mean, I used to live in San Francisco, and he lives in San Francisco. I think he still lives there. He's a big surfer, and he used to live in the Sunset, and I lived in the Richmond. He was kind of like a guy that was always around, he's so funny. Even the little clip of him and Kyle on the MTV Movie Awards,
right?
Where he says, "Let's talk about a guy that's in Wild at Heart," and Kyle goes, "I'm not in that movie, Chris. He didn't ask me to be in it." Chris, he does a beautiful take. I mean, he's just like, he's just great. He's great.
I remember at the time that Fire Walk with Me came out, one of the criticisms was, could we have had an entire movie about Chet and Sam investigating Teresa Banks, or should they have just done the Laura Palmer movie? I think people were thrown by the prequel to the prequel happening in a film,
Yeah.
and then having, of course, some allusions to a sequel with Annie showing up. But I have to ask you this: when they were filming this movie in 1991 for a 92 release,
Right.
why on earth did Lynch and his editor Mary Sweeney cut out the one scene between Kyle and Kiefer Sutherland? They were so big at that particular time, and to cut that scene out, I think that is a testament to what you were saying earlier, is they're going to do what they want to do, not what the audience wants.
I was like, I'm fully briefed. Well, supposedly, I'm sure you know this, they went through, they had to make a running time.
Right.
And there's an expression when you're editing a film or show, you have to kill your babies. It's an ugly expression, but it means you have to get rid of things that you don't want to get rid of for the greater good. And I think that Mary Sweeney made the case of, like, if this doesn't directly tie into Laura Palmer's story, it goes. And it's like you said, they had a deadline and a running time, and they did what they did. It is, I think that I'm in the minority, or, because he had the opportunity. He could have released the longer version. He could have made a director's cut. He could have done anything he wanted, and he never did. So there's really no argument to be made that the theatrical release of that film is what he wants people to see. I frankly prefer the Q2 fan edit, which is a little over 3 hours long, but I think it plays better. It satisfies my fan Jones, and those other scenes kind of ease up his foot's on your neck for that movie. You're going down a spiral with this poor girl. That I think it gives you a little bit of fresh air, you get to breathe a little bit. The last point is, I think that one of the reasons that he didn't go back is because, that movie punched him in the face in terms of his career. And I think that he just, he did not want to have anything to do with Twin Peaks for a long time after that. He would say, like, during Lost Highway, it's dead as a doornail. I think he was, that's the story that I tell on the True Tales from Lynchville. The thing that I really focus on is, like, that guy, to use an airy-fairy expression, that guy felt like Icarus. Like, he was 1990, he was on the cover of Time magazine. In 1992, he was in movie jail. Like, people were done with him. And it's he goes from the Palme d'Or at Cannes to fishing in Wisconsin in 2 years. That's a big one.
Yeah, it wasn't until 97 that another feature film came out, because he also had On the Air that tanked, and Hotel Room didn't do well. So
yeah. No, it is interesting. A lot of it, and I go into this in the podcast, because I was just the right age for all of that. I was living in Los Angeles. I moved to Los Angeles in 1989. My girlfriend and I, we had Twin Peaks parties. Like, we had the "Have you seen this man Bob" poster on the fridge.
Wow.
I remember I had a Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department coffee cup, and a good story about, and then it broke during an earthquake, and no, it broke. I dropped it and it broke, but I have a great story on how I got a replacement. I will tell you. But we went out one night. We were having people over to watch the show, and we went out to get 2 cherry pies, and we couldn't find one. That's how big the show was. Like, in Los Angeles, was you couldn't find a cherry pie at Ralph's. Because on Thursday they were bought up.
A good chunk of Twin Peaks was filmed in Southern California. So
Yeah, it's been nice. It was, yeah. And then suddenly the Pacific Northwest is Malibu Creek State Park.
have you walked the locations around your area before?
I have not. I mean, I'm assuming it's in Malibu Creek State Park. I have walked locations there because that's also I went to where the MASH 407 7th was, and I've seen all the Planet of the Apes locations, which is really, for me, sort of a biblical event. But I haven't done them. I have gone to Snoqualmie and gone to the Great Northern.
There's a scene in season 1 when Cooper and Sheriff Truman pull up to go to the Waldecker Veterinarian Clinic. A friend of mine showed me that location. I was like, oh wow, it's so cool to be here. And then cut to, I'm watching the new Criterion 4K of Mother by Albert Brooks. And there's a scene where he pulls up to that place. And I'm like, oh my God, it's the Twin Peaks location. And then I find out that location's also used in Friday the 13th Part 5. So it's kind of like once you see something, you start seeing the locations everywhere.
Yeah, the I forget the name of the house in Griffith Park. That is, it's in Blade Runner. It's in House on Haunted Hill. It's also the Frank Lloyd Wright house in Griffith Park. And when you see Lost Highway, you see David's house.
Which, that's a bold move right there to post where you live.
He doxed himself. In the Kristen McKenna book, he doxes himself. And it's not far. It's and it's about 6 minutes from me. I mean, we both evacuated the same fire.
Yeah, and now that he's passed, I can say this, but when you drove by his house, there's no gates. I mean, you could have just stopped and knocked on the door.
No, it's crazy, and it's clearly, if you knew that he lived on that street, but you didn't know what house, it's a very easy guess. It's like, oh, it must be that one.
Yeah. Now, you were saying before we were recording that you have bumped into him numerous times around town. So tell us a few of those.
Yeah, I have 3 really weird stories about that. The first time I ever saw him, and again, I was a huge fan. In fact, I remember the Lost Highway script went for like either $194,000 or $94,000. I had that script just because I was an actor at the time, and I called my agent when I knew they were making it, and I said, "Can you send me the Lost Highway script? I want to see if there's something I can go audition for." And there was, but I had that script with that cover, with that weird drawing on the cover. I remember having that script. I don't know where it is.
You could be $194,000 richer right now.
I know, it really could be. But, yeah, and I auditioned for Ed Wood and The Big Lebowski. I remember auditioning for those movies.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Both those would have been great.
Yeah, I auditioned for. To be in Ed Wood would have been. It's a whole other story. It's a whole other podcast. But so I just remember one day. This is probably around 95, 96. Just in a cab, pulling up to LAX, and getting out to get on a plane to go on the road, and there was David and Mary Sweeney and what was probably their son. David was holding a baby. They just walked right past me, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's David." And then a couple years later, like early, okay, I have to tell the story. I was, if you've seen Ed Wood, I was very good friends with a woman named Mila Nerney, who was Vampira in the 50s. Mm-hmm. And basically, I was to Mila what Ed Wood was to Bela Lugosi. We became friends, and we were friends for the rest of her life. And I, kind of helped take care of her, she didn't have any. She was alone. And we were very close. And she is also buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, with where that photo is taken, where David is, and I selected her plot, and I put her right in front of Darren McGavin, who played Kolchak, the Night Stalker, because I thought it would be funny if he chased a vampire throughout eternity. But she lived in Hollywood in a bungalow, and I remember going over to her house just to, I don't know, do something or just hang out for a bit. And then I went to the Starbucks across the street, and I got my coffee, and I opened up the door, and David Lynch was walking in, and we were literally just like, boom. and I don't know why I said this. And it was one of those things, like, it was out of my mouth before I said it. But I said, I spent a lot of money on you over the years. And I said it in a nice way. Yeah. And he laughed and nodded, and that was it. But and then I saw him speak at several foundation events, but I never, the closest I ever came to meeting him was at time at Starbucks.
Which I have to say, I never thought of him as a Starbucks guy, but
yeah, no, he went. I think any port in a storm when it came to a cup of coffee. But, yeah, no, I remember it really specifically because he had the black suit, like a black jacket and a white shirt buttoned up, and it was like a Nehru jacket, and it was frayed. I remember that very specifically. The collar was kind of frayed. He was an artist. He didn't, he was really simple. I didn't even realize this in terms of like name drops. So was very good friends with Stuart Cornfield, who put David in touch with Mel Brooks. And I knew Mel as well. So I have all of these weird, I know Mel and stuff. I have these weird tangential relations. But the crazy story was, so I had this Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department coffee cup that you would buy, that they sold them at, there's a store down here called Wacko, which is used to be on Melrose. And, it sold, it was everywhere. There was that period, that was that year where Twin Peaks was, you walked down Melrose and it was just, who killed Laura Palmer? Who killed Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department? Twin Peaks Phys Ed Department? Who killed Laura Palmer? Everybody had it. So I had this cup and I dropped it on the stairs and it shattered. So a couple of years later, there was a thing in LA called a recycler. And this is mid-90s, before the internet. And it was like, if you wanted to sell something, you'd put an ad in the recycler. And, selling a 10-speed bike, and people call you and you'd sell them your 10-speed. I was selling a fax machine. So this guy calls me and goes, yeah, I'm calling to Texas. He says, yeah, it's for sale. Yeah. He goes, great. So where do you live? I live in Venice. Okay, I'll bring it over. Great. And what's your name? Russ. Okay, Russ. You know where this is going? I drive over to Venice, knock on the door. Russ Tamblin. Like, oh, I know who you are. And we talked about like Twin Peaks and War of the Gargantuas, which I'm a giant fan of. And he was everything you wanted him to be. Mm-hmm. He was, he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, I think, for West Side Story. Mm-hmm. And they give you a certificate when you're nominated. And he had it hanging on the wall, but it was like sepia toned. And I said, and he was an artist. And I said, so, did you do that? Did you treat that? And he said, no, it's funny. It was the 60s and I didn't care about it. So, I had this in a frame, but I didn't care about it because it was the 60s. So I threw it on my roof. And then when I moved, I went out and got it, and the son had done that too. But he went to give me money for the fax machine. I went, I refuse. You cannot give me money. I'm giving you this fax machine. So he gave me his Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department coffee cup in exchange
Oh,
fax machine. Later, my friend David Cross married his daughter Amber,
Oh, wow.
and so I'm talking to them. This is like 2-3 years ago, and I told Amber that story, and she's like, "He still has that. It's in the garage. He won't throw anything away." It's interesting, Stuart. This is the story that Stuart told me. He said, that when they were trying to find something to do, and he was trying to get Ronnie Rocket made, because we go to Bob's Big Boy, and I was with the production company, and he had the deal, so I would pick up the check. Years later, Dave's a huge star. We go to have lunch at Bob's Big Boy. The check comes, and Dave was like, "All right, Stuart, you had the tuna sandwich and."
That probably goes back to the days that he was delivering newspapers for Eraserhead and, was counting every penny.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, some people were good. But here's the craziest story. So this is in the early 2000s, and I'm working on The Simpsons, and my wife is an executive in the business, and we live in a house, and we've got kids and neighbors, and it was a period of my life where I was behaving like an adult. My wife and I would get up in the morning and get the kids breakfast, and Nanny would come, we'd go to work, come back, whole deal. Neighbors were friends of ours, et cetera, et cetera. So one day I come home from work, and I walk in my house, and there at my kitchen table is Cheryl Lee, who I didn't know. And I literally went and said hello, and then sitting with my wife and our neighbor. And then I go into the other room where this is literally like on the bookshelf in the other room. So I'm like, I don't want her to see it because I don't want her to think like I'm a weirdo.
Well, she walked into your house. So.
Still, I didn't want to because I'm going to talk to her. So, and it turns out she was a mom at our school and was a really good friends with our neighbor, who's an orthodontist, and was our girl's orthodontist. And literally, Cheryl was at her house hanging out because they were friends, and because she was bringing over our daughter's retainer. Because when your neighbor's your orthodontist, you get perks like that. She says, "I'll just bring it home. Don't come in. I'll bring it home and give it to her." And they were just hanging out, shooting in the kitchen table, and then I walked out and tried painfully to be cool. I'm sure I failed, but she was very lovely. She was a really lovely person. And that was the strangest Twin Peaks interaction I'd ever had. It wasn't like bumping into somebody at at CVS. It's like, this is my kitchen. You're not supposed to be here.
Exactly. As a fan of Twin Peaks, you did go up to Snoqualmie and North Bend back in the early 90s. I'm not sure if you've been there since or what, but
I've not been there. I've not been there since. Although I really, I'm due for a visit. I will say my experience at what is the name of the real double R's name is
Tweeds.
Tweeds. My experience with Tweeds in 1993 is that is not where pies go when they die.
My impression is this: Mark Frost and David Lynch figured out the show, what they wanted to do, and then when they saw those locations, they began to write to those locations and to those actors, and that's why it feels so lived in from the first frame, because it feels like a real place.
Yeah,
because it is a real place.
It's the same feeling you get when you go to Malibu's Creek State Park, and the hills are the same from Planet of the Apes, if you're as familiar with every frame of that film as I am. That, yeah, you are walking into a complete world.
Mm-hmm.
Like this world is freestanding, and it's here for you when you want it.
When you walk into Snoqualmie and North Bend area, it's like you are there in the show.
Yeah, you're there. You're there in the show. You live in that world. It's absolutely true. Yeah. I really am. I really do want to go back. I remember when I went. I was performing in Seattle, and my friend, for some reason, my friend Lisa from LA was in Seattle, and I don't know why. And she was one of my twin, she was a very good friend of mine, and she would come we were all Twin Peaks people. So we were like, let's drive up. And we queued up the theme to play right when we got off the exit. So it was really perfect.
I mean, season 3 rejuvenated that whole area, because I went there in 2003, never been, had always wanted to go, finally was able to get up there. And I asked, oh, is there a shop around here that sells anything Twin Peaks? And they're like, you mean that show from like 12 years ago? Like they had completely written it off.
Mm-hmm. It was dead. That's the amazing thing. And again, that movie fascinates me because, yeah, it was like he stepped on a rake with that. And but then time gets the final say, and it came around. And what I didn't know that I learned later is how important that movie is to people who have endured that specific horror. Mm-hmm. And for that alone, it's like you tip your hat to it.
Well, one thing that I find interesting about it too is we all came to the film after seeing the show, but right. because the show was so hard to find for a couple of decades until it hit Netflix, right? That the movie was the thing that people discovered because it was on cable,
right?
So they would see the movie first, mm-hmm. and didn't even know there was a show.
Didn't even know there was a show, and it's so. I mean, it is. I remember seeing the movie on opening night, and I remember walking out of that movie and turning to my friend and saying, I think it was my friend Lisa, and I think I turned to her and said, "What have I ever done to you?" like I hated that movie when I saw it because it wasn't funny. That all the humor was gone, but I just wasn't ready for it. It's just one of those things, and there's how the list is so many great movies were just Citizen Kane, Apocalypse Now, all of these great movies that time had to happen. They were too good at the they were ahead of their time, and you had to let them congeal.
And then some movies that seem so relevant at the time, 20 years later, they're forgotten.
I'll give you the perfect example of those two. I was an usher in the summer of 1982. I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts, and we had 2 movie theaters and a drive-in, and it was all the same company. And when you worked there, you'd check the schedule and you'd be all over the place. You're like, I'm downtown on Tuesday, I'm out in the annex on Thursday, and then I'm at the drive-in over the weekend. So I saw every movie that very famous summer. And the movie that everybody saw, that everybody loved, was E.T., mm-hmm. which doesn't really age well. And when you see it now, is very much a museum piece, I feel. Like it doesn't resonate with kids the way it did then. The Thing, which everyone hated in terms of critics and stuff, could have been made yesterday, and it is still, if not more so, relevant to people.
Same as Blade Runner.
The Thing and Blade Runner came out on the same day.
Yeah.
And they were both bombs and critical disasters. I mean, The Thing, I didn't realize this. The Thing, like the Thing did to John Carpenter's career what Fire Walk With Me did to David Lynch's career. It stopped him dead. And, it took, he had to dig his way out of that hole. And I just don't, what I mean by, I'm not saying that E.T. is a bad movie. I'm just saying that it doesn't have the timeless appeal that the Thing does. It doesn't grow on you. It's very much of its time.
I think also one of the big issues is I feel, as much as I was a fan of Carpenter's work growing up, I don't feel like he properly got the respect until, I would say, Laserdisc, but really DVD. Once people started seeing his compositions and their full widescreen image, people started to appreciate him as a filmmaker, because in pan and scan, it doesn't quite work. Because he's always filming scope.
And he works in a genre that people don't respect.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but that's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
I think one of the best movies of, I think the Godzilla -1 is one of the best movies that came out that year, but it'll get a special effects nomination because, well, it can't really get that.
I am disappointed that 4K only has the color version, because I like the black and white one.
The black and white version is just it's like episode 8. It's just like sometimes black and white is gorgeous.
Well, I remember talking to Jennifer Lynch once and saying, do you think that the reception of Boxing Helena, do you think it had to do more with you and Kim Basinger, or do you think it had to do with the fact that your last name was Lynch and your dad was in movie jail?
I think it's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were just against the Lynch family making anything at that time.
It's so funny because I do talk about this a little bit in the podcast piece, which you can check out now, Dana Gould and I podcast. Twin Peaks in 1990 was very much of its time. It was a part of the 80s cultural hangover. And it was the George H.W. Bush presidency. The 80s, Twin Peaks and all that stuff was very much, we know we're not what we say we are in terms of a culture. It's Blue Velvet. It's like, it's a white picket fence, and then you go down and it's really weevils. And that, all of that stuff, Wild at Heart, Twin Peaks specifically, was very much a part of the cultural hangover of the 1980s. With the Bill Clinton presidency, we culturally turned a page. And it was all about it. Bill Clinton was elected. What was the theme song? Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow. It's the way people get elected. It's like, it's forward thinking, they give you something new, we're going to change America's going to go forward, we're going to start a new chapter. And just culturally, we moved on from that hangover period, and we didn't want to hear it, And it was just, that voice was no longer wanted in the zeitgeist. And you had to wait until we kind of got a little sick of that. And then 97, it was a different thing, and it was a different version. There was a big resurgence in film noir, James Ellroy was big, LA Confidential, all that stuff came about. And then I think I put Lost Highway very much into that. Lost Highway is really like a film noir horror movie. And he found his footing, he found his voice, but it was a lot of these things are very, very cultural, and they very much speak to their time.
But what's interesting is that right when Twin Peaks is dying, a little show called The X-Files comes out, which basically took Twin Peaks and they started doing what Twin Peaks never did, which was standalone episodes and then mythology. But they gave the audience a break so that if you missed an episode, you were okay for the most part. Whereas Twin Peaks, if you missed it, you were done. I mean, if you missed 2 episodes of Twin Peaks, you couldn't catch up in 1991.
Yeah. No, it was a much more, and you see this a lot. It was a much more user-friendly version of Twin Peaks. You know, and again, very much of its time. You know, back when conspiracies were fun.
Yeah. So when Twin Peaks comes out in 2017 and The X-Files comes back in 2017, why does a show like Twin Peaks excel and The X-Files seems like it's just kind of like treading water?
I think, one, I feel that the 3rd season of Twin Peaks was a contemporary telling of the story. I think he moved the story forward and he did not revisit 1992. That show is set in 2017. And I thought it was brilliant. And it took me a while to get used to it, you know, because I wanted my comfort food. I wanted cherry pie and coffee and Double R Diner. But no, the first shot is New York. Or one of the first shots. And I thought it was really brilliant that they moved the story forward. And I feel the X-Files was very much a recreation of that thing that you loved.
I'm going to have you back at some point because I feel like...
I'll come back anytime. And we got to talk about your movie. Whatever you need, I want to see it. It sounds great. And it would be great to continue this.
Everybody follow Dana at his website and all wherever you find your podcast.
Dana Gould on everything.
Make sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you soon. Take it easy. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.
To be continued.